For a while now, Valmiki had been composing his life's work, the Ramayana, the story of Ram's adventures as hero and king. He had started it long before I arrived at the ashram, so I didn't take it personally. I was afraid he might ask me for details of our life together, but he never did. Once I asked him how he knew the information he was putting into the book. After all, he hadn't been with us on our forest journey nor observed the terrible battles in Lanka. He told me that visions of all he needed to write came to him at the oddest moments, forcing him to abandon other activities and write them down. The resulting work, he said, would be an inspiring epic and a powerful poem, teaching readers and listeners in centuries to come how to lead a virtuous life. He was very secretive about it and never allowed anyone, not even Indirama, to take a look. If someone asked him to recite even a few lines from it, he refused. You will hear it at the right time, he would say, when it is all done. Except now he was stuck. The visions had dried up for some reason. Was it because he was now embroiled in the story himself? He walked around the ashram, glowering and muttering. Indra massaged his head with Brahmi oil to cool the brain and increase creativity, but it was of no use. Finally, Valmiki decided to travel to Chitrakoot mountain to meditate. Chitrakoot was known for being a holy mountain. It clarified confusion and shed light on darkness. It was also one of the places where Ram, Lakshman, and I had spent a significant amount of time. Perhaps Valmiki felt that walking in our footsteps would inspire him. The entire ashram was highly excited because Valmiki had not traveled anywhere in a long time. His students and even the other rishis begged to go with him. It would be an amazing experience, they said, to meditate with him on a holy mountain. But I think they mostly just wanted an adventure to break up the monotony of ashram life. Indirama urged him to take them along. They would make sure he ate and took his medicines and bathed at the right times. She had reason to be concerned. Once, long ago, he had meditated for so long that a huge anthill had grown all around him, covering him completely. Love and Kush clamored to go too, but when Valmiki whispered something in their ears, they nodded thoughtfully and didn't ask again. After the entourage had left, I asked them what the sage had said. Grandfather told us we needed to stay and protect the ashram. Love told me. He chose us because we are the best warriors he has, Kush added proudly. We are going to patrol the borders of the ashram every day with our bows and arrows, Love said. One never knows what kind of danger might come hurtling through the forest, Kush explained kindly. It is best to be prepared. I nodded, hiding my smile because the ashram was the safest place I had ever lived in. Probably the meditative aura that exuded from it created a shield. But the wise Rishi had said exactly the right thing to appease my children. I know you will do a great job, I said. Naturally, we can't do our other chores like cleaning out the cow stalls or cutting wood, Love said. We have to patrol full time, Kush added. Will you pack food for us every morning? Lots of food, Love said. It is hungry work patrolling. Indira Ma told them they were excused from cow stall cleaning and woodcutting until Valmiki returned. I agreed to provide all the food they needed. They went off, singing happily, to put new strings on their bows and sharpen their arrows. A week passed uneventfully, and then another. We didn't hear from Valmiki, but Indra said that was a good sign. The boys grew nut brown as they wandered the forest every day, coming home ravenous in the evening. They wouldn't let me comb or oil their hair, which now formed shaggy manes around their faces. They told me they needed to look fierce. What do you do out there all day? I asked. We practice fighting, Love said. We summon new astras, Kush said. How do you know to do that? I asked intrigued. The boys shrugged as though summoning astras was the most natural of activities. We send out a call and they come, Kush said. They tell us their names and their powers, Love said. He counted on his fingers. There is Aishik, which turns into thousands of lions. Just its roar is enough to frighten enemies to death. And Brahmajal, which falls on enemies like a huge net of fire. Don't forget Paushpatashra, Kush said. The snake Astra, which comes from Lord Shiva. It told us that only a few people on the entire earth are able to use it. But my favorite is Akshayajit. You have to be careful to give it the right instructions, though, because used at its highest power, it can destroy the three worlds. It has the ability to bring down even the greatest warrior in the world. There was a conviction in their voice that made me believe what they said, impossible though it seemed. I stared at them in amazement and some trepidation. These two beings that had come from my body. They were still boys, not even as tall as I was. I wondered what their destiny was to be when they were fully grown. For what heroic role was the universe preparing them? But meanwhile, it was my job to guide them. Don't you hurt anything as you are practicing, I warned you. What about in self defense? They asked. Well, you do have to protect yourselves, but try not to kill anything. The boys nodded. And don't be late for dinner, I said. But they would run off already. Tonight, the boys were very late. They always returned before dark. I had made them promise they would, so all of us women worried, pacing up and down. At night, the jungle turned into a different place, wilder, not to be trusted. We lit all the torches we had and placed them at the edges of the ashram boundary so the boys would see them and make their way to us, but still there was no sign of them. We beat gongs and blew into conches so they might follow the noise home. Still nothing. Finally, we heard a sound coming towards us, but it was not their footsteps. It was something large, tramping loudly along the dark path, brushing against the hedges as it got closer. My heart beat unevenly as I listened. I grabbed a torch, ready to fling it at the creature, whatever it was. But when he appeared, I stood open mouthed because There in front of me was the most beautiful horse I had ever seen, white as moonlight, with a long silky mane and muscles that rippled under his shiny skin. His great black eyes looked at me with deep intelligence. There was a red star on his forehead. He wore a thick gold necklace, but no saddle or bridle. And my boys, their faces and bodies dark with grime, were grinning at me from his back. Where did you get this horse? I said suspiciously. He was so beautiful that I would have taken him to be a creature of magic, except that no magic could enter the hermitage. He came up to us while we were protecting the ashram and nuzzled us. Love said. We thought he was hungry, so we gave him some fruit and soft new river grass. He really enjoyed that. I doubted that the horse had been hungry. He looked very well taken care of, but clearly he liked my boys. Otherwise, he would have shaken them off his back a long time ago. But why were you so late coming home? The boys jumped off the horse and hugged me. Sorry to make you worry, Ma, Kush said. But we had to defend our horse. People were trying to take him away from us. What people? It was some kind of army, actually, Love said. They told us the horse belonged to a king. He was a Yajna horse and had travelled all over Bharatvarsha. They wanted to take him away, but we could see he wanted to stay with us. I think he is tired of traveling. What happened to the army? I asked. The boys were probably exaggerating. It must have been a small group of grooms. Still, I looked around cautiously, wondering if they were about to rush in upon us any moment to claim their rightful property. Kush grinned. We defeated them, of course. I looked closer at my boys. It was not grime on their faces, but blood. My heart gave a shuddering leap. Behind me, Indra said, this must be a horse for the Ashwamedha Yajna. Only the greatest kings perform this ceremony. The horse runs free wherever it wants to go. Any kingdom it runs through has to accept the horse's master as its overlord. If a king stops the horse, he must fight the army that accompanies the horse. If he wins, he keeps the horse and is praised as the stronger ruler. If he loses, he becomes a vassal of the horse's master. Clearly, this horse has never been stopped. I wonder whose horse it is. I barely heard her. With shaking hands, I was busy examining the boys' bodies for wounds, but there were none. Love touched my face gently and said, don't worry, Ma, they couldn't hurt us. We prayed for your blessing and conjured a shield of magic arrows around us. We know nothing would get through it. Kush added, we could have killed them all easily, even the four generals, though they were quite good at fighting and had some fine astras of their own. But we remembered what you told us, so we didn't. Instead, we called on our unconscious astra and our binding astra, and the blood pounded in my ears. What four generals? I whispered. Love creased his brows. They said they belonged to the Raghu dynasty. They added a lot of stuff about how great it was. We couldn't hear everything. It was noisy there, with all those soldiers that kept rushing up trying to kill us. Their names are on the necklace, Kush said, holding it up for me. Mother, are you alright? I grabbed the horse's neck to keep from falling. Even before I read the embossed plaque that hung from the necklace, I knew what it would say. The great monarch Ram, son of Dashrath of Raghu Vamsha, is performing. The rest of the words faded away. Take me to the leader, I cried. He is your father. The dark meadow where the battle had taken place was full of bodies and slippery with blood. Love and Kush held my arms and guided me. I kept my eyes on the single flaming torch we carried with us into the black night. I was glad I couldn't see the grimaces of horror that must have frozen on the men's faces. I hoped the boys were right, that the soldiers were unconscious and not dead. I didn't want my children to suffer the heavy karma of so much killing. Even though by the rules of war they were innocent, having only responded to being attacked, I knew that karma worked in strange ways. Why else would Ram, Vishnu himself come down to earth, have suffered so greatly throughout his life? Why else would he have been forced to condemn himself to a life of royal, arid loneliness? Even before Love and Kush pointed him out, I sensed his presence and rushed forward. I fell to my knees and held his still, blood streaked face in my hands. He was bound with cords that sparkled and crackled as though they were made of lightning. They must have hurt. From time to time, his body convulsed, though when I pulled at them, they didn't harm me. That was the way of divine astras. I tried with all my strength to loosen them, but I was not able to do it. I glared at Love and Kush through my tears, too overwhelmed to speak. But they had started chanting already, and in a moment the bonds faded away, not only from Ram but also from his brothers who had fallen around him. Dharani Ma had followed me along with a few of the women. They poured water over Ram's body so I could wash it and handed me a basket of healing ointments. The boys held the torches steady as they applied ointment and whispered prayers. How handsome Ram was, even with a bloody gash on his pale cheek. But he had aged. There were lines of worry on his forehead and a downturn to his lips, as though life had disappointed him. I touched his wounds, he had many, and shuddered as though they were my own. All this time I had believed that I had successfully steeled my heart against him, but that was not true. I still like him as much as when we had been forest dwellers in our little moonlit hut in Panchavati. And remembering how he had sent me away without a word still hurt me as much as the night had arrived in Valmiki's ashram. While we were walking to the field, I had told the boys their story. A distraught Love had asked, "But why did you explain this to us earlier, Ma, instead of letting us think we were Rishi Kumars? Then we would never have done something so terrible today." "What would I have told you?" I said sadly. "That your father, though a great and valiant king, had banished me for no fault of my own because of a frivolous gossip. That he cared more for the stability of his kingdom and the brilliance of his reputation than he had for his innocent unborn children. Wouldn't you have hated him if I had done so? Wouldn't you have grown up angry and resentful and dissatisfied with the ashram, and perhaps blaming me, thinking that you should be in a palace instead?" "We would never have wanted to leave you, Mother," Kush cried, hugging me tightly. "We would never have blamed you. But yes, you are right. We would have been furious with Ram. We might have gone searching just to battle him. I noticed that neither of the boys would call Ram father, but they observed him intently. No doubt they were seeing what I had noticed earlier, and Valmiki too. My sons looked just like Ram, with only a soft touch of me around their mouths. But why weren't the ointments and the chants working? Why was Ram still lying there, pale as a corpse, his breath so shallow that I could hardly feel it? I tried again and again, and Mother Dharanima tried with me until the moon was low in the sky and the stars began to disappear one by one. Still, Ram was caught in a place between life and death. Finally, in exhaustion, I threw myself down on the ground by him and prayed. Was it to the gods or to the earth, my mother, or to the divine being I had been in the other world, or were they all the same? Help me, please help me. Praying thus, I fell into trance. I don't know how long it lasted, only that the torches had sputtered out by the time I came back to myself. And when I opened my eyes, I knew the answer. The herbs and the chants were not working because of my anger towards Ram. In some dark part of my soul, I wanted him to suffer. I took a deep breath and focused on the faces of my children. They hung anxiously over me, holding back only because Dharani Ma insisted that I shouldn't be touched when I was in the process of healing someone. I focused on the flow of love between us and the fact that more than anything in the world, I wanted them to be happy and fulfilled. But for that to happen, they had to develop their gifts to the utmost and then use them for the world's good. They had already learned whatever Valmiki and I could teach them. They had already learned whatever they could teach themselves. The best place for them now was their father's court. Ram had to be their teacher now, and to accept his teaching fully, they needed to love him. They couldn't do that as long as I held on to anger, for anger gives out a powerful vibration even when it is wordless. I concentrated as deeply as I could on my heart center. I spoke to myself, my inner self, or to the universe, which was ultimately the same thing. I give up anger. I felt a tingling in my palms and then a burst of energy surged through my body. I didn't know where it came from, the earth, the sky, or my own heart. Perhaps it didn't matter. My body grew light, almost as if it would lift off the ground. I placed my hands against Ram's chest and repeated the healing chant. This time, even as I finished, he took a deep, jagged breath. Under his lids, his eyeballs moved. I waited, holding my breath, for him to open his eyes and see me. What would he say? What would he feel? Would he be grateful? Would he ask for forgiveness? I imagined him opening his arms wide and gathering us close, myself and my boys. I imagined how it would be. Someone touched my shoulder, startling me. To my surprise, it was Valmiki. I saw in meditation all that was happening here, he said. I returned immediately using my yogic powers. You are to be commended for saving Ram's life. I hadn't thought it could be done. Then his face grew sad. But this is not the right time for him to see you or your sons. That occasion will come, I promise. For now, though, you must take your children and go. I wanted to protest, to refuse, to be so close to my beloved husband and not converse with him, not enjoy even a moment of his touch, not see the admiration in his eyes because I had raised his sons so well. I confess. I wanted also for him to know that I had saved his life. I had let go of my anger, yes, for the sake of my children. But I would have minded a little gratitude, the look of shame in his eyes, an apology. But there was the ring of truth in Valmiki's voice that made me pull the reluctant love and kush to the shelter of a big banyan tree little distance away. From behind its hanging roots, we watched as Ram gained consciousness and sat up too quickly, for he had to be brace himself with his arm. He looked around disoriented. There was confusion on his face and also disappointment. He hadn't noticed Valmiki yet. I think he is looking for love and me. Kush cupped his hands and whispered in my ear. I was sure he was right. From behind him, Valmiki cleared his throat meaningfully. Ram spun around and put a hand to his head, as though the sudden movement made him hurt. Jivarat says, he said, bowing to the Rishi, have you seen the two young boys who detained my Ashwamedha horse and did what no one in all of Bharatvarsha has been able to do? They defeated our entire army and then took on my brothers and myself as well. One by one, they brought us low. Ah, the way they called upon the most complex and powerful astras. I have never seen it done before. Even as they lay paralyzed on the ground, I marveled at their skill and wondered if they were children of the gods. Love stifled a laugh. Did you hear that? He whispered in my other ear. He thinks we are gods. I scowled at him to be quiet. I didn't want to miss even a word this conversation. Do you know who they are, Rishi? Ram asked plaintively. I'm not sure why, but even as they were battling me, I felt a great fondness for them, as though he shook his head. Are they from your hermitage by any chance? I have no idea who you could be talking about, Valmiki said straight faced. Did you hear that, mother? Love exclaimed, scandalized. Grandfather is lying. I didn't know sages were allowed to do that, Kush said with prim disapproval. Sometimes they are, when it is in good cause, I told them. Hush, listen carefully. I think grandfather has a plan. I wondered why Ram could not guess who Love and Kush were. He had sent his pregnant wife to Valmiki 14 years ago, and now here were two boys who looked just like him. But perhaps guilt keeps us from seeing things that are otherwise as clear as cloudless sky. My disciples and I were away, Valmiki said, all innocence. We were meditating and didn't keep track of worldly things. I have only returned right now and am shocked to find that a great battle took place here. He chanted some mantras and sprinkled holy water from the pot he was carrying in every direction. Ram's brothers sat up, glancing around in confusion. No doubt they too were looking for my sons. Slowly, the soldiers were also beginning to stir. The women tell me that last night a horse wandered into our compound, Valmiki said. Ah, here it is. He gestured and a couple of his disciples pulled the Yajna horse forward. They had to struggle because the horse dug in its hooves and snorted menacingly and looked towards the banyan tree where the boys were. Mother, see, he doesn't want to go, Love said. He's looking for us. He wants to stay with us. He liked us better, Kush said. But they had to watch helplessly from behind the banyan while Ram walked over to the horse and patted its neck. The horse tossed its head a couple of times, but finally calmed down and Lakshman led it away. It was time for Ram to leave too, but he was delaying for some reason. There was another thing, he said to Valmiki, speaking so softly that I had to strain to hear. In my swoon, I thought I heard her voice. She was taken care of. I clasped my hands tightly together. He was talking about me. Somewhere in the depths of his being, he had left my presence. Valmiki looked at him blank faced. Who could you be thinking of? Ah, no matter. It was probably just a fever dream, Ram said, shaking his head as though to clear it. River says, thank you for restoring our horse. Now the yajna can be completed. I invite you most humbly to come to Ayodhya with all your disciples to bless the yajna on this holy occasion. I accept your gracious invitation, Valmiki said magnanimously. He sent a triumphant flash of a glance towards the banyan tree, where he knew we were hiding. But how will you conduct the yajna? I believe a king has to have a wife by his side when he makes the final offering. Has there been a wedding in Ayodhya that, sequestered as I am in the forest here, I didn't know about? I twisted my sari so tightly in my fist that it tore. Love and Kush stared at me in astonishment. Ram's face was pained but also resolute. No, Great says, I have not married again. I have been true to the vow I made at my wedding to take only one life partner. I have a golden image of. Here he stumbled over his words. My wife by my side. The priests have said that would suffice. When he heard that, I wanted to both laugh and cry. Was it only because he felt he must be true to his vow that Ram hadn't remarried? Or was there another reason? I am glad to know there will be no impediments to the yajna, Valmiki said. I look forward to attending the ceremony. It is a rare king who manages to perform this ritual. But then, you have always been an exceptional monarch, haven't you? Ram lowered his head modestly, but I could tell he was pleased with Rishi's praise. Was I the only one who heard the irony in Valmiki's voice? I will bring my senior disciples with me, Valmiki added. They will chant auspicious mantras to bring prosperity and happiness to your kingdom and to you. Ram sighed. I thank you. I would greatly appreciate your prayers. For some reason, though, Ayodhya treasury is full than ever before and its citizens healthy and prosperous. It is lacking something. Some kind of life, some joy has gone out of the city. No, the entire kingdom. I wonder how that could have happened, the sage said. Another man might have grown suspicious at his overly innocent tone, but Ram only sighed again and said, I hope your blessings will bring us some peace. I am sure it will, Valmiki said piously as he walked Ram to his chariot. And joy, in addition, if God wills. As Ram was about to drive away, he added, in fact, to enhance your joy, I will bring 3 special gifts for you when I come to your court. No, don't ask me what they are. You will just have to curb your curiosity until the day of the yajna. He stared after the chariot thoughtfully for a long while, even after the sounds of the marching army faded and the dust settled and the forest creatures that had been frightened away returned to forage and feed. Then he returned to us and put his arm around Love and Kush. I know now what I must do, he said. I will take the boys to the yajna. There in the court of the king, after the ceremony is ended, they will sing his life story, my Ramayana, which I am now ready to complete, having envisioned clearly how it is to end. When the king sees Love and Kush, he, along with the entire court, will recognize that they are his sons and he will accept them as his heirs. And our mother, Kush asked, will he accept Ma too? He would better, Love said belligerently, otherwise I am not staying in Ayodhya. But Valmiki had hurried on ahead, perhaps so that he wouldn't have to answer them, and I followed his lead. Thanks for listening.